Committee meeting on Tuesday, October 20th, 2020 at 5 p.m. at City Hall Chambers. Our topic this evening is the 2021 budget review with emphasis on street department and park and recreation. We'll go around the room and introduce ourselves. I'll start with my right, Joe.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Paul Vollert, Public Works Superintendent.
Matt Heidemann, Parks and Rec Supervisor.
Jake Klingforth, staff.
Jay Bemke, District 8.
Shane Blazer, Mayor.
I'm not sure exactly how, with Tim, how to introduce this, but maybe Joe, you could get started. The streets.
Yeah, Paul's got a street department summary prepared, and we can go through that first, and then we can follow up with Matt, who has the summary of the parks.
Sounds good.
So for those of you that are here, I handed out to you a spreadsheet that Tim used to use for our original budgets. The staffing level as it is budgeted remains the same. Just go through and highlight some where there's changes or increases or decreases. Street administration wise, as of right now, there's nothing that is being changed. You go to the second page. With our insurance company, they used to come in and do our annual training every year. Our rep no longer is capable of providing our OSHA training that's required of us, and so we now have to contract those services out. And so that's where there's that net increase of $10,000 for the training. We had intended to use United Rentals to do the training this year. We still obviously have to do that, but because of COVID, we haven't had the opportunity to do that yet because they're not willing to come into our location to do the training. There's also, once again this year, we have the possibility of having 3 to 5 senior staff members retire, and so there's additional time for equipment training and things like that that's required. You'll see in the bottom there where it's broken out between presentations and or equipment training. The equipment training piece is kind of a ongoing thing there. The next page then is street repair and maintenance. This is an area where there's 2020 we had a relatively large increase. In 2021 we're kind of proposing the same increase. Most of that was because of the storm of 2020. We weren't able to do a lot of our street maintenance because we were spending the amount of time we were to clean up the city. And so it's just a matter of trying to get us back on track with our schedule. And then you'll see from 2019 to 2020, we also increased or added our mill and fill program. And so we're proposing to continue to do that in 2021 again. So we're, like I say, pretty much maintaining the same dollar value that we proposed for this year's budget. The 2021, the street that we're proposing to mill and fill is Dewey Street from Lincoln Street to Hill Street, which in theory is about where the hospital's campus begins. That street has had a lot of issues with the surface coming off and things like that, and we don't plan on doing or any need for replacing the underground or things like that. Also, planning a relatively slightly above average chip seal program like we did this year, like I said, just to make up for the stuff that we did not do in 2019. Once again, the breakdown of that large chunk of budget is included there. Snow and ice control, it's the same plan that we've always had. Only difference is our salt prices have increased a fair amount. So that's why the material prices is the increase. And we've also looked at, instead of trying to get more pieces of equipment out so that we can get it done in a shorter amount of time for less inconvenience for the general public, so that increases our labor dollars slightly, but provide a better service to the taxpayer or the users. So that's why our labor rates have increased slightly, and the equipment rental rates have increased also. And once again, that's kind of the breakdown of the different activities that are included in that budget. Next item then is brush and weed control. For the second year, we're proposing we've had relatively decent success with it this year along the West River Bank. We have some staff that are certified applicators. And so after we cut the stumps along the riverbank, we used an appropriate product to wipe the cutoffs. And I would say we probably have 95% of it that didn't grow back. So hopefully after this year, we'll be able to reduce our budget in that activity there and put it someplace else, because we don't have to, go back on an annual basis. That's what the intent is to try to go on a biannual basis so we can move the money someplace else.
I'm really pleased with that, because that was some of the concerns I've had from some constituents. That's in my district about the weeds on the west side, so thanks, appreciate it.
Obviously some of it too has been reduced because of the East River Bank project. There in the past there was a lot of shrub or brush and things like that were along that shoreline, and now with the shoreline stabilization project piece of that brush has gone away and it's all rock now. But I think we need to make sure we do our due diligence so that doesn't grow back through the rocks. I guess I don't have anything else on the brush and weed control piece of it. It's kind of that piece of it is kind of a split project or a process between the Parks Department staff and our staff, that hopefully in the future we'll maybe tackle this as far as the budget piece of it, because the street department budgets money for mowing the right-of-ways, and the Parks Department also budgets some money for the right-of-way, and we're looking at getting rid of those parks and street silos, and it's just going to be public works activities. And so future budgets may look different than what this year's budget's going to look like in the future moving forward. Street signs and marking, this one here, there's a slight decrease in our budget. Past practice has always been that we have 3 full-time staff that are down at the sign shop for the summer months to do our pavement marking and our sign repair and things like that. For the most part, it's all doing pavement marking until it rains or inappropriate weather to paint, and so then that's when we do our sign maintenance. Just with the last few years with our staffing levels being lesser, and with whether it's personal injuries or workman comp things or birth of a child or things like that, we're going to try this year to go back how we've done it sometimes in the past, with having additional seasonal help down there, so that as a seasonal employee is very beneficial. They do also have limitations because not all of them have CDLs and things like that. And so a lot of the activities down at the sign shop don't necessarily require that CDL, but they require persons to, put out cones or shake glass beads over the top of fresh paint, things like that. So that's where the reduction in the wages in the ILC comes from. We'll still have that third person who's relief to be able to fill in when someone's on vacation, but we'll be using seasonal employees as the additional hands instead of a full-time staff down there, so that we can have, number one, hopefully everybody on our crew stays healthy, but so we can have that additional person there. Then you go to garbage collection. Originally in the 2020 budget, we were projecting there to be a little less tipping fees and things like that. And I'm not 100% positive or confident when I say that this is due to COVID because there's more people at home and eating out and things like that. But we're a little bit higher than we originally had budgeted. And so I continued that, what we're currently at as far as garbage collection goes for the 2021 budget. It's still a reduction from what we've had in years past, but it's not what we were originally seeing. And like I say, I'm not 100% confident in my statement that it's because there's more people that are home because of less traveling, less athletic events or things like that. But I didn't think I would do very good justice in projecting a shortfall when it's not going to happen this year. So let's hope COVID goes away and we make those projections like what we had thought. And you know, I think we're hitting our labor rates and things like that. Originally, we had thought that it was going to take us like 8 to 9 hours to pick up the garbage. And for the most part, we're right around that 9 hours, but I had budgeted in this 2020 year to be right around 8. So that's why the equipment rental rate is that slight increase of that $14,000 is just because of that additional hour every single day. It's kind of the same thing then. I'm sorry, you skipped to page 107 or whatever under the recycling. The recycling is kind of the same thing, where we had projected that it was going to take us anywhere from 7 to 8 hours, and we are really pushing that 8 to 9 hours. So that's the increase of the wages, because before there was more time that wasn't necessarily charged to recycling, it was charged to equipment maintenance and stuff like that. So it's just kind of a shuffling. Instead of it going to the overhead account that covers the equipment, it goes to the recycling. And once again, the equipment charges are up slightly just because of that additional time. We're doing pretty well with recycling as far as hitting. Originally in the 2020 budget, it was 1,275 tons, and we're probably right on track with that, maybe slightly higher. Switching then, carrying over to the compost piece of it. Really no changes there on how we've done things differently, except for the fact on our spring and fall cleanups, we're requiring property owners to call in, which works great. We can get through the original list quicker, but then we have some cleanup, you know, when the garbage guys see bags that are put out that weren't necessarily called in and things like that. So hopefully here this off season we'll do some more education for property owners for the spring of 2021, and we'll be able to be a little more successful than we already are with that. But for the most part, it's continuing to do business the way that we have. The street department activities are based in 2 different funding sources. So this next section, it's under the stormwater utility. That activity is the street sweeping and the storm sewer maintenance and things like that. The street sweeping budget is just that. In reviewing the budget from previous years, I've missed some activities that we haven't necessarily budgeted towards this account, and so that's why there's an increase in the $7,000. Is we weren't allocating our time in the spring of the year to clean up after winter, as far as sweeping off the boulevards and things like that. So that's why there's an increase in that activity. Storm sewer maintenance, that's where we're going around and cleaning up catch basins that were hit from plowing of snow or ring failures and things like that. There's a relatively large increase there kind of twofold, where we've been, for the last 2 years, the wastewater treatment plant, when they go and clean catch basins every single year, have been doing an inspection on the catch basins, and then we are rating those and then identifying future failures or else possible failures. But we haven't used that information yet. So in 2021, I really want to start to do preventative maintenance instead of reactive maintenance, which is where we're at right now. You know, there's a failure, there's a hole in front of a catch basin, or the structure sinks or whatever, we react and do maintenance to that. It's costly. If we can get to do more preventative maintenance, we can probably, well, would do more, but it would obviously cost less because we don't have to replace the curb and gutter. We don't have an asphalt patch in front of it. And so we're still going to have that reactive maintenance that we're going to have to do probably for a couple of years here. But the hope is that eventually we'll take everything off of sections that 30% of them are getting done every single year. And so we'll be able to fix that on a preventative basis. You know, it still might be some to the same level that we're currently doing because they're too far gone when we inspected them. But the hope is that we'll be able to not be as in depth on our fixes on that. It'll just be a matter of filling in around the rings or whatever before it gets too far gone. So, so the reason for the increase is just trying to bite off some of those that are less work than doing the full bore maintenance on it. So then there's that last sheet then is just a breakdown of the different items that are included in there. Some of those are engineering items that they do as far as Digger's Hotline. One of the things that I failed to say when I went through there, and I apologize, under the street repair and maintenance activity, you'll notice that there's a relatively large increase in the hot patches, about $50,000, just shy of $50,000. There are probably 12 to 15 large paver patches, you know, throughout the residential neighborhoods that we probably won't get to this year. And so normal budget is typically like 30 patches, and we've already done 50 patches in town, you know, with these additional 20. So, you know, we've been fortunate, knock on wood, we'll get 2 more weeks of weather to be able to do some things before deer season. You know, that's kind of when everything shuts down. But I'm planning that we're not going to have everything completed in 2020, so that's why the increase for 2021.
I noticed those large patches really make a difference. There's a couple in my area, and they were really poor, the little potholes and so forth. And he did a large swatch of it, and it's great. And it's really proactive, preventative. So.
You'll also see some of that with the updated degradation ordinance. The utility patches have to be a little more substantial, again, to try to maintain the ride as much as possible. So, you know, we're trying to both prolong the life of the street as well as offer a good ride for the people using them, you know, using the streets.
I'd be curious to see what data you might eventually has it after 2 years. What the benefit and costs, for example, savings by the city, that the water and light will be covering that. So it'd be a good idea, I think.
Yeah, and it'll also be, I mean, there's a lot of these patches we have a lot from, you know, various utilities. So we've got our water utility, there's some electric, not a whole lot, but some electric, phone, our wastewater utility, We Energies, Solaris, Charter's still pretty much overhead, but, you know, all these utilities access our roads, and in the past have done it. That's not their primary concern. Their primary concern is their utility service. And yeah, so we'll have some data as we get into that program and complete the first couple of years.
Well, I remember, I think it was last month or a month before, we ordered a larger blade for one of the plows. Are we gonna get it this year? Because I was thinking of your labor, that might be advantageous. Or
Yeah,
maybe
that-
it's next year.
Nope, that was actually earlier in the month. You'll approve that hopefully tonight at the council.
Yeah.
And I believe the turnaround time on it is 45 days.
Oh,
So we'll probably start off prior to the first of the year with the old one on it. But then it'll be put in service right away. We installed it on the last two loaders that we had, and I think within a day and a half, we had it in service, so,
that might save labor too.
yep.
Any other questions people may have? Anybody zooming in have a question? Okay, I guess we'll go on to Park and Rec.
We're good? Okay, not a lot of big surprises in the Park and Rec budget this year, other than a couple notable exceptions, which we'll talk about. I tried to keep everything as tight as I could and still get the work done that's required. This will be my last budget as an employee of the city, and hopefully Jake can make some sense of what I've done here. We'll go category by category, starting with Witter Field. Not a lot of big changes there, very small increase, basically covering wages and waterworks and lighting. That number may change. There was a change made with the lease with the rafters going forward, and there's a cap now on utilities. And once that cap is passed, those additional costs have to be paid by the rafters. So I would anticipate seeing a possibly even a decrease in our utility costs going forward after this year. But the total at Whitterfield came into just a 2% change in cost. Meadfield, pretty much the same. It's actually a decrease from the original 2020 budget. I think 2 years ago now, the splash pad is included into the Meadfield cost. It used to have a separate cost account number. Now it's under the umbrella of Meadfield. So we do have some higher utility costs there now and a little more labor. But 2019, 2020 are hard years to use as comparisons. Obviously, 2019 we had the storm, and this year with the COVID. But I was able to cut our costs at Meadfield compared to the 2020 budget by about 15%. Green areas, there was an increase, obviously with the East Grand project and the East Riverbank project. There was a considerable increase in both labor and material costs. East Riverbank, for example, we used to be able to mow that in 4 hours, now it takes a day. So there's quite a difference. Mulch, I think this year we did about 160 to 180 yards of mulch, which is more than double what we were doing for the parks. So that has an increase, but still less than what I'm anticipating from 2020. We didn't know what we were getting into. You know, that was our first year with the improvements. So we're actually projecting between the 2019 and the 2020 costs. It's kind of in the middle. Mary's department rec is pretty much flat across the board. I think it's within $100 of what it was last year. So virtually no change in the rec department. She wasn't able to attend tonight, but I did check with her, and everything there looks like it's going to be status quo. Parks department. There is an increase in Parks department. We've put in money for an additional employee. We split it 75-25 with 75% under parks, 25% under aquatics. That person basically will be doing the duties that Jake did this year at the aquatics. He would be our maintenance guy. The plan is to have him trained so he is a pool operator. He'll be able to take care of the chemicals and do the other tests that are required on a daily basis at aquatics. Obviously, Jake will be doing my job, and he won't have the time to spend at the pool that he did this year. So that associated cost, I don't know if your number has been updated. We added this morning, but basically what it did is it added 42,619 to parks plus the roll-ups. That's another 33,000. So you're looking in somewhere, you know, in the neighborhood of 75,000 added to the parks, and then the remainder would be added to the aquatics budget, which would be approximately, I think, Joe, you put in 18,000, and
Yep,
a roll-ups
that's right.
would be another 14,000. So that's the big change in the Parks Department. Tree care, we're running about the same. I did decrease it slightly. I don't think we're going to have quite as an aggressive of a planning program coming up this coming year. We did actually more than 2 plants this year. It was a pretty aggressive year for trees. You know, we're going to end up somewhere in the neighborhood close to 100 planted this year. So pretty aggressive year in the tree department. Zoo, we've had some small increases over the last few years. Animals, utilities have gone up, material costs, but basically it's not a lot, about a 5% increase for this coming year. And Christmas decorations, we did a slight decrease. We're not going to be doing the large mayor's tree down by the bump out this year. That was fairly labor intensive, and we made some other small changes, so we have a decrease of approximately $8,000 in the Christmas decorations for this year. And that about covers it.
I was just, 2 questions.
Sure.
What's the status of Robinson Park? I mean, is there a long-term plan? Is the Park Commission, I guess there's been a discussion and brought up since we lost trees
Yes,
to what we could make it into.
there is currently, actually, the last Park Department meeting, they were presented a plan to go forward with a new master plan. And as part of that master planning portion, Robinson Park will be addressed as far as long-term use and any changes in use.
Okay, and then, what's the status of the discussion for fees for the aquatic? People talked about if we could have increase or whatever the fee would be to go to the aquatic center, so that then people could maybe purchase them before the holidays. Are we still in that process of obtaining it or identifying it?
Yes, we are. We actually did present some changes at the last Park and Rec meeting. Some suggestions were made by the commission, and we're going to alter some of our original, and we should be bringing the revised plan back at the next Park and Rec meeting.
Well,
And
that's great.
it does include some discounts, different stuff. We addressed, I think, veterans and some other scenarios with discount passes, so yes.
That's great. And also, we had vandalism over there. Do we have cameras or looking into getting cameras or?
So there are cameras installed over there. Some of that vandalism, those suspects have been identified, and some of them were youth, and so they have attempted to go through the county services process. That failed, and so now they're being criminally charged. Be hard to say whether or not the city receives restitution for that or not. Just significant amount.
Yeah.
There's been some other vandalism to the bathrooms, and some of those cameras aren't operating the way we would like yet. There are, as part of that aquatics project, there's a few cameras that still need to be installed, and then all the cameras need to be properly trained. to be focusing on everything that we want them focused on. So they're set up and operating. They're just not necessarily pointing in the direction that we want. That's an ongoing process with the contract that we have with Myron Construction and their subcontractors for the work at the aquatics. We're also reviewing a proposal to add 2 cameras to the skate park. One that would capture images as users enter, and another that captures really the whole activity area. So we certainly are looking at making sure that system's up and running and can provide us the best information we can, trying to minimize some of that activity.
I was just curious if it had to be added to the budget. Any other questions people may have? Any questions from people online? I don't have any other questions, so I guess the third item on the agenda is adjournment. I move to adjourn. Steve seconded. Okay, we're adjourned at 5:45.